On the day of our engagement party, my fiancée Emily ran away in front of everyone for the sake of her male best friend, Michael.
Today is my promotion celebration. Please enjoy the food and drinks.
Later, when Emily asked me to reschedule the engagement party, I handed her an invitation instead.
There won't be another engagement party. You're welcome to come to my wedding.
Just before the engagement party, Emily approached me, holding her car keys.
James, I'm sorry, but something happened with Michael, and I need to go to him immediately.
I had just changed into my suit and was about to go out to toast the guests. I almost thought I misheard her.
Emily, do you know what day it is today?
To show respect, almost all my relatives had taken time off to come, and her parents were sitting at the main table waiting. Now Emily was telling me she needed to go to Michael? She must be out of her mind.
I've already agreed to marry you. What more do you want? We can reschedule the engagement party, but something serious might happen to Michael.
I took a few steps to block the door, locking eyes with Emily.
What if I told you nothing happened to Michael?
Emily reacted like a cat whose tail had been stepped on, instantly flaring up.
James, do you have any heart? Michael grew up with you. It's just an engagement party. Do you really have to be so petty?
Here we go again. Michael had meticulously planned to ruin my engagement party, and in the end, it was me who was seen as the bad guy. From the past to the present, it was always like this. Michael could do anything to me, but if I voiced even the slightest complaint, I was the jealous one, the one who envied him. I closed my eyes and stepped aside. Emily rushed out the door. She pushed so hard that the door rebounded off the wall and hit me, the pain snapping me back to reality. The host knocked on the door, asking if we could start.
Are we ready to begin?
The engagement party is canceled.
I apologized to her and told her my new plan. Emily didn't want to use her initially, thinking it wasn't appropriate for a girl to host a wedding. After discussing it, I decisively chose her, even though it caused a minor argument with Emily. I didn't compromise. She was indeed very professional. After I finished speaking, she quickly helped me finalize the new plan. In the banquet hall, everyone was waiting to start. I took a deep breath, stepped onto the stage, and picked up the microphone.
Today is my promotion celebration. Please enjoy the food and drinks.
The crowd immediately buzzed with confusion. My parents and Emily's parents looked at me in shock. I didn't explain, handing the microphone back to the host. She quickly calmed the restless atmosphere. Apart from the occasional curious glance, no one mentioned the engagement party again. After seeing off the guests, I brought Emily's parents and mine back home. I retrieved the wedding rings Emily and I had bought together from my room and returned them to her parents.
Uncle, Aunt, it's just that Emily and I aren't meant to be. I'll return these rings to you. I hope Emily finds someone she truly loves in the future.
Emily's parents refused to take them, insisting they would scold Emily on my behalf. I took out my phone and opened Michael's social media. His latest post read, "She said she would never let go of my hand." The picture showed two hands intertwined. Ironically, one of the hands was wearing the engagement ring I had prepared. Emily's parents immediately recognized her hand. Emily's mother tried to apologize on her behalf.
James, this is Emily's fault. Can you forgive her this once? Auntie apologizes on behalf of the Jiang family.
I shook my head. This had nothing to do with Emily's parents from the beginning, and I never blamed them. Emily's choices were her own, and no one could control her. But I couldn't just let this go because of their apology. I had given Emily enough chances. Now, I wouldn't hold back.
Michael's claim of being in danger was just a trick to deceive Emily. Whenever Emily and I were together, he would always have some minor incident, but it always turned out fine. It was his old trick, like a child vying for attention, and it always worked. He said he was afraid Emily would stop caring about him after getting married, so he wanted to test his importance in her heart. Emily repeatedly proved to him that even if she was going to marry me, she wouldn't abandon him. James woke up early to go for a run and bought breakfast on the way back. His mom hesitated before finally speaking up.
James, What did you mean yesterday when you said you were celebrating your promotion?
James swallowed the bun in his mouth before answering her.
Mom, my boss plans to open a branch in the north and asked if I was interested in going. He wants to promote me, so I agreed.
But bro, didn't you say last time that it was too cold there, and you wouldn't go even if they forced you?
His younger brother looked up at him, his reaction a bit slow. Mom quickly reached over and put the straw of the soy milk into his mouth. James grinned at him.
I couldn't resist, the offer was too good.
Previously, James didn't want to go because Emily said she didn't want him to be too far from her. They were about to get married, and living apart wouldn't be good for their relationship. Considering that, he had refused his boss's offer. But now, he realized that Emily wasn't worth it. When James walked into the office, his boss was surprised.
I thought once you made a decision, you wouldn't regret it. I was already looking for someone new. Since you've changed your mind, the position is still yours. When can you go? Do you need a few days off?
No need, I can start immediately.
James organized his tasks and handed them over to his assistant, booking a flight for the next day. After landing, he turned on his phone to find dozens of missed calls. There were calls from Emily's parents, and his brother. He also saw an unexpected name, Michael. James couldn't be bothered to respond, so he only called his parents back. They picked up quickly.
James, have you landed? Is anyone picking you up? I heard it's really cold there. Remember to wear more layers.
Mom hadn't finished her nagging when his brother grabbed the phone.
Bro, Emily called the house today asking where you went, but don't worry, I didn't tell her. She needs to learn to appreciate you.
I didn't plan to ignore her. She's not worth the effort.
The other end of the line went silent. James heard some shuffling, then his brother spoke again.
Bro, are you serious? You're really done with Emily?
Yes, I'm done.
They chatted a bit more before James hung up. As soon as he left the airport, he got into a car driven by an old friend. Knowing he was coming to Los Angeles, Sarah had offered to pick him up, so he sent her his flight details. She held the steering wheel but didn't forget to chat with him.
Why did you come to Los Angeles? I thought you hated the cold. Why didn't Emily come with you?
I'm here to manage the branch. Emily is with Michael. We're not together anymore.
She turned her head sharply to look at him, and James quickly reminded her to watch the road. Life is long, and he had no intention of making drastic decisions because of Emily. Sarah pulled the car over and looked determined to get to the bottom of things. James ended up telling her everything about Emily and Michael. Emily had it wrong from the start. Michael and James were never friends. From the first time he saw Michael as a child, he couldn't bring himself to like him. Michael was always fragile, always in need of protection. At his birthday party, Michael said he wanted to be alone and hinted at harming himself. Emily ran out before she could even finish singing the birthday song. The next day, she bought a small cake to make it up to him.
Don't be mad. I just felt sorry for him and was afraid something might happen.
Emily patted her chest and assured James that he was the most important to her. But later, the gift he gave her ended up in Michael's hands. Emily went to her extracurricular class, and Michael insisted James go to his house. He reluctantly went. As they passed through the living room, Michael accidentally knocked over a Luffy figurine, shattering it into pieces. He hurried to get a broom, deliberately slowing his movements. James clearly saw his name on the base of the figurine. He couldn't help but pick it up and read, "Emily is the biggest fool in the world, James." It was a birthday gift James had saved up for months to give to Emily. When she received it, she almost jumped for joy, kissing the figurine several times, saying no one could take it away from her. But that day, the figurine was at Michael's house, broken. James forced himself to calmly ask him why the figurine was there.
Emily gave it to me. I told her my favorite anime character was Luffy, but I couldn't get a limited edition figurine. Emily said she had one at home and brought it to me. Unfortunately, I accidentally broke it. She'll be mad if she finds out. James, you have to help me keep this a secret.
James was young then and didn't know how to hide his emotions. He ran off with the remaining base. He didn't talk to Emily for days. A few days later, Emily came to find him. He thought she was there to apologize, like last time. But she had a stern face.
I only lent the figurine to Michael. I also told him that if he was scared when his parents weren't home, he could call me. When I apologized to you last time, you said you weren't mad anymore. Why did you go and give him a hard time?
James realized that Emily would never understand his feelings. James looked puzzled, trying to understand Emily's accusation.
Causing trouble for Michael? When did I ever cause him trouble?
Emily gritted her teeth, her frustration evident.
Don't pretend with me. Wasn't it you who went to his house and deliberately broke that figurine? James, don't be so petty.
Her scolding made James's nose tingle with emotion, but he insisted on telling the truth.
Michael said it was a gift from you. And he broke it himself. I never touched it.
Emily didn't believe him at all.
James, if you're going to lie, at least come up with a better excuse. Michael loved that figurine so much that he even packed it carefully in a box when lending it out. How could he possibly break it himself? Even if you're upset, there's no need to falsely accuse someone.
Emily's harsh words left James feeling wronged, but he still refused to apologize to Michael. They remained in a Cold War for a long time. It wasn't until something happened in Michael's family, and he was taken back by his grandmother, that James's relationship with Emily began to warm up again. James never expected Michael to reappear. By then, Emily and James were officially together, and she organized a birthday party for him. Michael followed Emily in and greeted James.
Happy birthday, James.
James's friends looked at this unexpected guest, unsure of how to respond. Emily quickly introduced him as her brother. James frowned, feeling displeased. But Emily looked at him with pleading eyes, and he said nothing in the end. Michael, however, wouldn't let it go. He took out a Luffy figurine from a large box at the door and offered it to James.
James, this figurine caused a fight between you and Emily before. I'm giving it back to you now, hoping you won't be mad at me anymore and that you'll get along well with Emily.
The atmosphere turned awkward. Both Emily and James looked uncomfortable. Michael's presence made James's birthday party particularly awkward. Worse still, Emily and James fell into a strange pattern. Whenever James needed Emily, Michael would inevitably need her help with something, big or small. Emily said Michael was alone here without any friends, so she had to go. James, on the other hand, had plenty of friends. James didn't know how to explain to her that some things are different when a friend helps versus when a girlfriend helps. She knew James was uneasy and promised him that he would always be her priority. To make him happy, she even planned a trip. James turned down a project from his boss for it. James still remembered his boss frowning and asking him,
You should know what it means for me to assign this project to you.
Of course, James knew. It meant a promotion and a raise, recognition for his years of hard work at the company. Even so, he gave it up. But that day, Emily didn't show up. James found out where she was from Michael's social media. Michael posted a picture without any caption. In the photo, Michael was wearing swim trunks, and Emily's hand was on his waist. The implications of that photo were too much. James stayed in the hotel he had booked, not leaving for a whole day and night. Emily finally rushed over, eager to explain as soon as she arrived.
On the day of our departure, Michael suddenly called, saying he had just had a scare in the water and was very frightened. I didn't have time to tell you and turned back to check on him. It turned out to be a false alarm. Michael was learning to swim and had a leg cramp, causing him to swallow some water. He said he was too scared after the incident and begged me to stay with him for a while.
James listened with a blank expression, wanting to end things.
Emily, I think we should break up.
But Emily clung to his hand, pleading.
I know I was wrong and will never do it again. My family has already set a date for our engagement.
James stared at the engagement ring in her hand, a strange thought crossing his mind.
Would Emily firmly choose me if we got engaged?
He agreed, almost against his will. Then reality hit him hard. To say he wasn't hurt would be a lie. Emily and James had grown up together, yet they couldn't withstand the intrusion of someone who came along later. Sarah tightened her grip on the steering wheel as she listened, and just before she could react, James's phone rang. It was Emily.
James. We're about to get married. Can you please be more understanding?
James sighed, the weight of the situation heavy on his shoulders. Michael really got into trouble this time. Don't be petty like when we were kids, okay?
Why don't you just apologize to Michael? It'll settle everything.
Are you sure? If I apologize to Michael, it's all over?
She nodded frantically on the other end, saying yes.
I'm sorry, Michael, for taking up so much of your time. I wish you both happiness.
Before Emily could respond, Sarah had already grabbed the phone.
Michael, you jerk! Apologize to you? Get lost!
She angrily cursed and then hung up the phone, looking at James awkwardly afterward.
I couldn't hold back just now. You won't blame me, right?
Of course not. How could I be mad at a friend over a stranger?
I don't know how Emily found this place. When I opened the door, she looked exhausted.
Emily? What are you doing here?
What did you mean by what you said that day?
Which words?
You told Michael you wished us happiness. Why did you say that?
Oh, that. I remembered now. She had run to Michael so many times that I thought she had some feelings for him.
I'm sorry. I didn't know you didn't like Michael. Why don't you tell me who you like, and I'll bless you again.
Emily's eyes reddened as she stared into mine.
You know that's not what I meant. James, you know it.
I know? Know what?
You know I've always loved you. I said I would only be with you in this lifetime.
Oh, that. How troublesome. I brushed off imaginary dust from my clothes, wanting to close the door, but Emily held onto the door frame tightly, not letting me shut it.
Are you upset because I ran away from the engagement party and you're deliberately giving me a hard time? James, there was a reason that day. I'll make it up to you with a better one.
Emily rambled on at the door, attracting curious glances from the neighbors. I never liked being the subject of gossip.
Wait for me at the cafe downstairs.
After handling my work at the company, I drove back to find her. Emily was still obediently sitting in the cafe. I sat down across from her, glancing at her phone, which had dozens of missed calls. All from Michael.
Why don't you take those first? It might be something important.
I told his friends to help if anything came up.
I nodded and sat down. So, she had made sure he was taken care of before coming to see me. She looked at me nervously, trying to reach out and hold my hand, but I deftly avoided it.
I have principles. I don't touch other people's girlfriends.
Serious James stirred the coffee in his cup, beginning to help Emily recall their past. Serious, do you remember? At my birthday party as a child, everyone was singing for me, but you ran out alone. You said his parents weren't home and promised to keep him company. Emily, don't you remember? You also promised to celebrate my birthday with me. Serious Emily hurried to explain, her voice trembling slightly. Anxious, that was because he was scared being alone, and you had so many people with you. I thought it would be okay. Serious James waved his hand to interrupt her and continued. Serious, the Luffy figurine. I saved up for a long time to buy it. When I brought it home, my mom saw the price and scolded me. I held it tightly, thinking of surprising you. But later, it ended up at Michael's house.
I was just sad back then.
Something I worked so hard to give you ended up in his hands so easily. Serious Emily looked anxious, trying to clarify. Anxious, he said he really liked Luffy, but the figurine was hard to find. He just wanted to borrow it to look at. Serious, no, that's not it. Serious James stared into Emily's eyes, his gaze unwavering. Serious, that's not it, Emily. He said you gave it to him and even broke my gift with your own hands. I ran away holding the pieces with your name on them. I waited for you to explain. You did show up, but only to blame me for bullying him. Sad Emily seemed deflated, no longer rushing to explain. Then there were things that happened after they started dating. Emily and James getting together was almost inevitable. Emily's uncle and James's dad were good friends, and over the years, they moved houses together. Emily and James were practically inseparable. Serious when Michael reappeared, James thought this time he had the upper hand. Thinking about the past still made him a bit resentful. Serious Emily, on my birthday, he gave me a Luffy figurine just to remind me that he had once defeated me. It was your favoritism that gave him the confidence. He provoked me again and again. You and I had planned a trip, but you turned back because of him. You worried he might drown, but did you ever think about how I felt alone in the hotel? Emily, you forgot that I'm afraid of the dark. Sad James's tone was very gentle, completely different from how he usually spoke to her, but Emily's eyes reddened. Sad Emily had booked a hotel in a remote mountain area where they could soak in hot springs. Unfortunately, the power system failed that day, and the entire hotel lost electricity. Although James was a grown man, childhood trauma left him unable to stay alone in complete darkness. Emily knew this. Even when he slept, he would leave a night light on. That night, he didn't dare close his eyes. When Emily found him, his mind was still in a fog, and he muddled through agreeing to the engagement. He didn't expect it to be self-inflicted humiliation. Sad James laughed at himself. Sad when you left that day, I was actually relieved. Relieved that you firmly chose him, so I had no way back. If anyone asks in the future, make sure to say it was you who didn't want me. Otherwise, it would be quite embarrassing. You always cared about face when we were kids. This time, I've given you enough face, so you should think kindly of me. Sad the more James spoke, the bigger his smile grew. He looked at Emily, who bit her lip and started to cry. He stood up to leave, and she stumbled a few steps, rushing over to grab his hand. Desperate James, I know I was wrong. I really know I was wrong. I'll change. Really, I'll change. I never didn't want you. The person I love has always been you. Sad, she held on to him, and for a moment, he couldn't break free. He could only turn back to look at her. Emily's eyes were red from crying.
He had never seen her like this.
He wanted to pry her hand away, but she held on tightly, shaking her head and pleading with him. Desperate, don't go, James.
Please don't go.
Sad, but the one who always left first was you. Sad James looked down at Emily's hand. How could someone, after hurting others again and again, still say they love them?
He didn't understand.
Sad Emily seemed to be burned by something, quickly letting go of his hand. She wanted to reach out but was too cautious to do so.
Desperate, I'm sorry, James.
I won't do it again. Please forgive me this once, okay? Sad this.
Starting a branch office wasn't easy, and I rarely went home. It wasn't until 2 days before the new year that I managed to find some time to visit my parents. Emily's house was just separated from mine by a wall. From my window, I could see her yard. I drew the curtains and didn't look outside. After Emily and I parted ways, I deleted all her contact information. Throughout the entire Spring Festival holiday, I passed by Emily's house dozens of times but never took a step inside.
Come in for a drink. It's been so long since we saw you.
Thank you, but I must decline. I'm just passing by.
On the 5th day of the new year, Sarah came to my house to pay a visit.
Sarah, you've helped James a lot at the branch office. Please stay for a meal as a token of our gratitude.
Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a familiar figure through the window.
She's been standing outside all day. I wonder who she's trying to impress.
Stop talking. I'll handle it.
I called Emily's mother to explain the situation. She quickly came out and took Emily back home, and I breathed a sigh of relief.
Once the branch office is stable, do you plan to stay there or come back?
I'll probably stay there. The main office is managed by the boss himself, and I have more freedom over there.
Sarah nodded and didn't say anything more. The boss said I had worked too hard the previous year and gave me a few extra days off, so I didn't return until after the Lantern Festival. I don't know how Sarah managed it, but she also extended her leave and insisted on returning with me. At first, she could still chat and joke with me, but after glancing at the rearview mirror, her smile faded.
Emily is following us.
I looked back and sure enough, it was her. I felt a headache coming on.
After explaining everything to her that day, I thought we had an understanding to leave each other alone, but it seems Emily has become more persistent.
Why don't you find someone new to make her give up?
Someone new? Where would I find someone new?
Sarah coughed into her fist, her earlobes turning an odd shade of red.
Ahem, if you don't mind, I could reluctantly pretend for you.
Sarah's words that day left me a bit stunned. I wasn't sure if she genuinely wanted to help me or had other intentions. Having known her for so many years, I had never sensed that she had any feelings for me beyond friendship. With Emily repeatedly bothering me, I hesitated for a long time before calling Sarah and asking her to come to the office to pick me up after work. When Emily saw Sarah, her expression changed.
What are you doing here?
I'm here to pick up my boyfriend from work.
I opened the car door, but Emily rushed over and held it shut.
James, I won't let you leave with her.
I pried her fingers off one by one and calmly got into the car.
Emily, don't be like this. Weren't you always the generous one?
I smiled as I watched her let go and slowly crouch down, burying her head in her knees. Emily's figure grew smaller and smaller in the rearview mirror. For some reason, I felt an inexplicable sense of relief. In the past, I was the one stubbornly holding on to Emily, not allowing her to see Michael. But she always looked at me with disappointment and urged me not to be so petty. Now that I was being generous, she was the one who couldn't accept it. Not long after we drove off, a boy waved at us from the right front. Sarah asked me to slow down and stop to see what he wanted.
Senior, could you give me a ride? I happen to have something to do near your place today.
Sarah furrowed her brows, cautiously stealing a glance at James before waving the junior off.
No, today I'm spending time with my boyfriend. We're not heading the same way, so you should take a cab.
With that, she rolled up the car window and drove off. James remained silent throughout. Sarah, however, took the initiative to explain.
That was a junior from my old lab. He just got transferred here this year. I haven't actively met him.
James found it somewhat amusing. They were just pretending to be a couple. There was no need for her to explain anything to him. Emily wouldn't do that. Every time she helped Michael, she always felt it was only natural, just mutual assistance between good friends. If James tried to stop her, he would be seen as unreasonable and petty. He had learned his lesson and wouldn't interfere in others' matters anymore. Sarah secretly observed James for a long time, realizing he genuinely didn't care. Her fingertips turned slightly pale. She cooperated with him very well. Whenever Emily was around, she always behaved impeccably. When Sarah and James went out for a meal, Emily would inevitably sit at the table opposite them. Midway through, Sarah received a call from her junior. Her brows knitted together.
This kind of thing isn't appropriate to ask me. You can enroll in a driving school to learn driving, contact customer service for choosing a light, and take a cab if you need a ride. Junior, I've told you, I have a boyfriend. I don't want to upset him.
Emily heard her words and slowly lowered her head. It was at this moment that Michael walked in. He immediately spotted Sarah and James sitting together, a look of delight appearing on his face.
Emily, you're really here. I've been looking for you for so long. Why haven't you been answering my calls?
Is there something you need?
The company is adjusting positions, and my role requires me to know how to drive. Can you teach me? I'm not comfortable with anyone else teaching me.
James suddenly became interested, putting down his chopsticks to watch. Emily also looked over at him. Michael's tactic never failed. He always said he trusted no one but Emily, and Emily would soften and rush to help him despite James' objections. But this time was a bit different. After hearing his words, Emily looked at James instead, as if expecting something. Sarah noticed her gaze and couldn't help but turn to ask James.
Why is she looking at you? Could she be expecting you to stop her?
Don't be silly. She's irrelevant. Why should we care?
James' words made Emily's face fall. Seeing this, Michael turned his attention to James.
James, Emily, and I are just friends. Friends should help each other, right?
You're right. Emily is your best friend. Of course, she should always help you.
Michael raised an eyebrow at James, then turned to Emily.
See, I told you James is the best. He wouldn't be jealous of you helping me.
Emily, however, ignored him completely. Sarah noticed something off in her expression, paid the bill, and took James away, leaving Michael and Emily behind. Later, James heard that Emily had a breakdown that day. She tore off the necklace Michael was wearing, pushed him to the ground, and his hand got cut on broken glass. Emily's uncle had to bail her out from the station. When Emily's uncle called James, his voice was very tired.
James, Uncle knows it was Emily's fault, but Uncle wants to ask you to visit her, please.
Emily's uncle had a good relationship with James' dad and had helped him a lot when they were younger. After some thought, James agreed. He also brought Sarah along. Emily lay on the hospital bed, her excitement fleeting when she saw Sarah walk in with me.
Emily's uncle mentioned you weren't feeling well. My dad asked me to check on you.
I placed flowers and fruits by her bedside, maintaining a courteous but distant demeanor. Emily's mother glanced at Sarah and me, seemingly wanting to speak but holding back.
That day, nothing happened between Michael and me. He wanted to see the ring, so I gave it to him. He said he lost it, but then I saw him wearing it around his neck. So, I took it back. James, I brought it back just as it was.
Emily extended her hand, revealing our engagement ring. I raised my hand, showing her my ring finger adorned with a different ring, given to me by Sarah.
So, can we go back to how things were?
She didn't say it out loud because she saw the ring on my finger. Sarah and I had agreed to pretend to be a couple. She helped me deal with Emily, and I helped her avoid the pressure of marriage. Today, Sarah insisted I wear the ring when visiting Emily.
Emily, we can only go this far. I hope you won't disturb my life anymore.
I threw myself into work, not thinking about Emily again. Sarah visited me occasionally, saying it was on my mom's orders to ensure I ate. Sarah was beautiful and elegant, attracting many young men in the office.
Miss Sarah, do you have a boyfriend?
You should ask your manager, James.
The intern blushed and apologized repeatedly. I glanced at Sarah, who looked both nervous and shy.
Didn't we agree to part ways once everything was settled?
Your issue is resolved, but mine isn't yet. James, I want to ask you to consider me.
Sarah insisted on taking me home. She knocked on the door for a long time, but there was no answer.
Looks like your parents aren't home. Maybe we should come another day.
There was an immediate response from inside.
We're home. Just a moment.
The door opened, and her mother greeted me warmly, ushering me in. Her parents bustled around, making tea and washing fruit for me. While Sarah helped with the cooking, her mother pulled me into her room and took out a dried mango seed.
What's this?
In her second year of high school, Sarah brought a mango home and kept it on her desk, unwilling to eat it. At first, I thought she was craving mangoes, so I bought a bunch for her, but she didn't eat any of them, only touching the one on her desk every day. When I asked, she answered vaguely, "A classmate gave it to me."
Her mother continued, explaining how Sarah's strange behavior was revealed when she graduated from high school.
Many classmates came to our house. I peeled a bunch of mangoes, and Sarah peeled one herself. She gave them to all her classmates, including you. The one she gave you was the only one she peeled herself.
The meaning of the mango seed became clear. Sarah had always cherished it because it was connected to me. After Sarah graduated from university, her mentor tried hard to persuade her to stay. Initially, she was determined to return, but later, for some unknown reason, she suddenly agreed to stay.
I heard from your mom that you're seeing someone now.
The story abruptly ended. They kept urging Sarah to go on blind dates, hoping she could move on quickly, not really to pressure her.
I guess she never told you that she had feelings for you long ago.
After returning from Sarah's house, many memories came flooding back.
Remember in high school, classmates often joked about Sarah and me?
When the class organized a hiking trip, Sarah was adamant about not going. Our deskmate suggested I ask her, saying she would definitely agree if I did.
During the graduation party, the cultural committee asked Sarah to host. She initially refused, but later, someone mentioned that I was the male host, and she agreed.
On the day of the graduation photo shoot, many boys wanted to take pictures with Sarah, but she refused all of them. Except for the group photo, she didn't take a single picture with any boy, except me.
When things started to surface, all the irrationalities had an explanation.
When I found Sarah with that only photo of us together, her face turned bright red.
Care to explain?
So what if I had a crush on you?
She waited for my response with her eyes closed, and my lips brushed against her cheek. She opened her eyes wide and looked at me. Our wedding invitations were soon sent out.
I noticed you because I saw that your special treatment was only for Emily. I envied such obvious favoritism. But I saw Emily and Michael together. Emily wasn't worthy, but someone else was.
We chose the hotel for our wedding, the same one where I had once been engaged to Emily.
I want to erase your past embarrassment.
I couldn't argue with her and agreed.
When we went to book the banquet, the hotel receptionist gossiped with me.
In the banquet hall opposite yours, another couple is getting engaged, and the groom has the same name as you.
I smiled and didn't pay much attention.
Until that day, when Sarah and I were at the entrance welcoming guests, I saw the people in the opposite banquet hall. Emily stood there, wearing the same dress as that day, looking at me from afar. She walked over step by step.
James, I owe you. Can I repay it all now?
I took out an invitation from the entrance and handed it to Emily with both hands.
Cancel the engagement party. You're welcome to join my wedding celebration.
Emily's hands could barely hold the invitation. In the opposite banquet hall, the relatives who once mocked me were sitting there, watching me walk down the red carpet with someone else. I never looked back. Later, Michael lost his job. It was Emily's aunt's company, and her aunt had always tolerated Michael because of Emily. But that day, he messed up a big deal. Her aunt was negotiating with a client who had brought his wife. Michael accidentally spilled tea on the client. Everyone in the room, except Michael, turned pale. Michael, however, was oblivious.
I was just afraid of people. There were too many people.
The client's wife smashed her cup and walked out. Her aunt, furious, called Emily to come and take him away. Emily didn't defend him, only telling her aunt to handle it professionally. Her aunt didn't hesitate to fire Michael and spread the word in the industry. Although she didn't say she would blacklist him, it effectively ended his career in that field. Michael went to Emily for help, but she didn't even open the door. Emily's uncle came to visit my house.